In the last 24 hours, a familiar showdown is back in the spotlight. Washington and Tehran are trading tough words again, while quiet talks happen behind the scenes. And it all comes down to one question: does this end with a deal, or does it spiral into something far more dangerous? On the US side, President Donald Trump is sending two messages at once. The pressure is real, but a deal is still on the table. In Tehran, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is striking a different tone. He's calling this a test of resolve, warning that any escalation won't stay contained. Behind the headlines, things are moving fast. Reports say the US has reached out through multiple channels, signaling it's open to talks. Even more interesting, regional mediators are trying to set up a meeting in Ankara. Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar are all reportedly involved. That matters, because while both sides sound tough in public, they're quietly keeping the door open in private. But make no mistake, the tension is real. The US is also building up military forces in the Gulf. So diplomacy isn't happening in a calm room. It's happening under pressure, with deterrence clearly on display. And that's what makes this moment so unpredictable. In recent comments, President Donald Trump spoke plainly about the chances of negotiations, and he made it sound like talks are already happening. Trump said he hopes Iran agrees to a deal he says would block nuclear weapons and bring stability. He also made a key claim: Iran isn't just considering talks. They're already talking. Seriously. That statement does a lot of work. It frames this moment as a clear choice for Iran: accept limits in exchange for relief or walk away. It also reinforces the US red line: any deal must directly address nuclear weapons. And by saying talks are already underway, it shapes expectations. If something goes wrong, the blame can be placed on whoever walked away. But the tone from Tehran couldn't be more different. Iran's leadership, especially Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, sees US pressure as more than negotiation tactics. In his view, it's about control, coercion, and extraction. In a speech in Tehran, Khamenei accused the United States of wanting to dominate Iran and seize its resources. Then came the warning. In separate remarks, Khamenei said that if the US starts a war, it won't stay limited. It would become a regional war. That's not a casual statement. It's deliberately broad and deliberately alarming, because it reframes escalation as something that wouldn't just affect two countries, but an entire region. This messaging isn't aimed at just one audience. It's meant to deter Washington, reassure US allies in the region, and convince Iran's own public that toughness equals safety. But here's where things get complicated. The same reports full of hardline warnings also say mediators are working overtime behind the scenes. Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar are trying to set up talks in Ankara. And at least one US official says a meeting could happen as soon as this week. That means public threats are running right alongside private coordination. And notice who's involved. When several regional players push for talks at the same time, it usually signals one thing: fear. Fear that escalation could spill across borders, disrupt markets, and trigger a regional crisis no one can control. Officials from those countries reportedly see negotiations as the best way to stop a wider conflict. So while the public debate sounds like a head-on clash, the reality backstage is far more layered. Warnings, signals, and intermediaries, all operating in parallel. There's another key piece here: how the White House talks about power. When asked about Khamenei's warning, President Trump pointed to US naval strength in the region and then tied it right back to a deal. Trump said, "Hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't, then we'll find out whether he was right." That's classic pressure with an off-ramp. Strength up front, but the exit is still a deal. To understand why this matters now, you have to zoom out. This is happening amid rising tension over nuclear issues, shifting regional alliances, and mounting internal pressure inside Iran. Iran's internal protests and the government's response have drawn international attention. Some US messaging has linked pressure on Iran directly to those crackdowns. At the same time, Iran's position has been consistent. It says it won't negotiate under threat, and it won't give up what it sees as core defense capabilities. That's where the two narratives collide. Washington frames this as an opportunity. Take the deal, avoid escalation. Tehran frames it as coercion. Resist the threat, avoid humiliation. Both stories can exist at the same time, and that's why the next few days matter. If the Ankara meeting happens, even at a preliminary level, it could change the rhythm. Clearer demands, structured talks, a pause in escalation. But if talks fall apart, the risk isn't just higher tension. It's both sides blaming the other and digging in even harder. There's also one more factor: time. When leaders say talks are moving, they signal urgency. Something could happen fast. But when they use words like disastrous or no more talks, they're also speaking to domestic audiences, making sure they don't look weak. So what does each side actually want? From Washington's perspective, the priority is clear, at least publicly: a deal that guarantees Iran never gets nuclear weapons. And that's the line everything else revolves around. From Iran's side, the priority is clear: protect sovereignty, maintain deterrence, and avoid any deal that could look like surrender at home. For the intermediaries, the goal is even simpler: stop this from spiraling into a regional crisis. That's why who is mediating matters. Turkey often hosts tough, high-stakes talks. Qatar has a long track record of quiet, behind-the-scenes negotiations. And Egypt carries real diplomatic weight on regional security, with channels others don't have. Together, they're working to build a framework for talks. That coordination signals urgency, but it also signals something else. Neither Washington nor Tehran wants to be seen as the side that refused diplomacy, even while both negotiate from strength. So here's the big question everyone's asking: is this a real opening for negotiations, or just messaging? White House officials say President Trump hasn't made a final decision and is still open to a diplomatic solution. At the same time, they admit they don't know whether Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei would approve any deal the U.S. finds acceptable, and that's the core uncertainty. In Iran's system, major strategic shifts need approval from the very top. Khamenei's public remarks are meant to show he won't bend under pressure, but history tells us something important. Public toughness doesn't always mean private inflexibility. Leaders often sound uncompromising in public, then negotiate quietly behind closed doors, especially when economic and political costs start to rise. So where does that leave us right now? Two tracks are running at the same time. Track one is loud: deterrence, warnings, military signals, and hardline rhetoric. Track two is quieter: diplomacy, intermediaries, tentative planning, and signals that talks are possible. What matters most is which track starts to dominate. If a meeting in Ankara is confirmed, and it includes officials with real authority, the story shifts fast. Timelines, proposals, constraints, verification, trade-offs. But if that meeting collapses or keeps getting delayed, the story flips. More pressure, more rhetoric, less room for compromise. For now, the only honest conclusion is this: both outcomes are still on the table. President Trump is publicly expressing hope for a negotiated outcome while emphasizing U.S. strength. Supreme Leader Khamenei is publicly warning that escalation would spread and portraying the U.S. as seeking domination. And in between, intermediaries are racing to push this into a diplomatic format before events take over. In the next few days, we'll find out whether the quieter track, the one built through private channels, can outrun the louder one. Because once the louder track fully takes over, stepping back becomes politically costly. And that's why this moment is being watched so closely.